The rain fell on London in a relentless, grey sheet, turning the cobblestones to mirrors of a leaden sky. From the window of the War Office, a room thick with the scent of ink, anxiety, and cheap coal, Miss Elara Vance watched the world blur. To the clerks and junior officers who scurried past her desk, she was a mere smudge on the vibrant canvas of Whitehall, a quiet, unassuming woman of 25, her mousy brown hair perpetually tucked into a severe bun, her spectacles perched on the bridge of a nose that was often buried in ledgers. She was a phantom, a creature of silence and paper, and they had no idea that within her mind whirred the most brilliant cryptographic machine in the empire. Vance. The voice, clipped and authoritative, belonged to Sir Malcolm Thistlewood, the man who held the strings of Britain's clandestine war. Elara turned from the window, her movement fluid and silent. "Sir Malcolm." He gestured with a sharp nod towards his office. She followed, her posture instinctively folding into the shy, slightly stooped demeanor she presented to the world. Inside, the air was thick with cigar smoke and the weight of secrets. "We have a problem," Thistlewood began, without preamble, steepling his fingers on his polished desk. "A leak. Critical information regarding our naval deployments in the Channel has found its way into German hands. We've narrowed the source to someone with access to the Admiralty's weekly strategic briefings." Elara said nothing, merely waiting, her hands folded neatly in her lap. "The prime suspect is Lord Alistair Finchley." Thistlewood slid a dossier across the desk. "A respected peer, sits on several defense committees. Charismatic, wealthy, well-connected. He's untouchable through conventional means. We need proof." Elara opened the dossier. A photograph of a handsome, dark-haired man with a sharp, calculating gaze stared back at her. His face was all angles and ambition. "Your mission," Thistlewood continued, his voice dropping, "is to get close to him, observe, listen, and find the cipher key if one exists. He is hosting a fortnight-long house party at his country estate, Blackwood Manor, beginning Saturday. You will attend as the distant cousin of a minor diplomat, a guest of little consequence. Your cover is your armor. Be shy, be forgettable, be the wallflower no one notices. And in the shadows, do what you do best. Break him." Elara met his gaze, her own eyes, a clear and startlingly intelligent gray, hidden behind the lenses of her spectacles. "I understand, sir." "There is a complication," Thistlewood added, a note of distaste in his voice. "His brother, Lord Sebastian Finchley, will also be in attendance. A former cavalry officer, invalid out after a riding accident. He's popular, a charmer. Do not be distracted. He is likely just a frivolous distraction, but be wary of him nonetheless." "I am not easily distracted, sir," Elara replied, her voice a soft, neutral murmur. But as she left the War Office later that evening, the dossier burning a hole in her sensible leather bag, she felt a familiar thrill beneath the calm exterior. This was a different kind of code, not one of numbers and symbols, but of human nuance, of whispered conversations and hidden glances. It was a puzzle, and Elara Vance lived for puzzles. Blackwood Manor was a sprawling edifice of honey-colored stone, nestled in the rolling green hills of Sussex. It spoke of old money and unshakable tradition. As her hired carriage crunched up the gravel drive, Elara felt the weight of her role settle upon her like a second skin. She adjusted her spectacles, smoothed the simple, dove-gray fabric of her dress, and let a faint, uncertain smile touch her lips. The house party was a whirl of silks, laughter, and the clinking of crystal. Elara kept to the periphery, as her character demanded. She was introduced as Miss Elara Vance, a cousin of the Wilmots, and was met with polite, fleeting smiles before the other guests turned back to their more engaging companions. It was precisely as planned. She saw Lord Alistair Finchley within the first hour. He was even more imposing in person, tall, with a commanding presence that drew the energy of the room towards him. His eyes, a cool, assessing blue, swept over her during introductions, dismissed her in an instant, and moved on. Perfect. It was during a tedious game of croquet on the lawn the following afternoon that she first encountered the complication. Her ball had veered wildly off course, landing with a soft thud near a bench tucked under a large oak tree. A man was sitting there, a sketchbook open on his lap, a faint smile playing on his lips as he watched the proceedings. As she approached her errant ball, he looked up, and Elara felt an unexpected jolt. Where Alistair was sharp and polished, this man was all warmth and relaxed grace. His hair was a shade lighter than his brother's, sun-streaked brown, and his eyes were a warm, laughing hazel. A faint scar bisected his left eyebrow, a small imperfection that only served to make his handsome face more interesting. This was Lord Sebastian Finchley. "A treacherous patch of ground, just there," he said, his voice a pleasant baritone that held genuine amusement. "It has claimed many a victim." Elara ducked her head, playing the flustered miss. "I fear my skills are rather lacking, my lord." "Sebastian, please," he said, setting his sketchbook aside and rising. He moved with a slight, almost imperceptible hesitation in his right leg. He picked up a mallet that had been leaning against the bench. "Allow me to demonstrate. It's all in the wrist." He didn't just tell her. He stood beside her, his presence solid and surprisingly comforting. He didn't touch her, but his guidance was clear, his patience endless. He showed her the angle, the gentle swing. When she managed to tap the ball back towards the lawn, a small, genuine smile broke through her carefully constructed facade. "There. You see." Sebastian beamed at her, and the warmth of it felt like the sun after London's endless rain. "You are a natural, Miss Vance." "You are too kind, my lord," she murmured, looking away. "Not at all. I simply appreciate a willing pupil." His gaze was direct, but not intimidating. Felt seeing. As if he was looking at her, Elara, and not the shy creature she was pretending to be. It was unnerving. Later, in the solitude of her bedroom, a charming, if small, room in the West Wing, Elara unpacked her true tools. Not dresses and fripperies, but a keen mind and a small, concealed notebook. She began her first entry. Subject: Lord Alistair Finchley. Observed in deep conversation with Sir Robert Mears, MP for Portsmouth, noted naval constituency. Topics: trade tariffs, briefly. Then, moved to the new artillery foundries in Sheffield. No overtly suspicious content, but the direction of questioning was strategically probing. He is careful, deliberate. She paused, her pen hovering over the page. Complication: Lord Sebastian Finchley. Engaged subject in conversation during croquet. Charming as warned. Surprisingly perceptive. Offered assistance without condescension. Presents as open and genial. Potential liability to the mission's emotional detachment. Must maintain focus. She underlined the last 3 words, a reminder to herself. She was a codebreaker for the War Office, not a simpering debutante to be swayed by a handsome face and a kind heart. Yet, as she blew out the candle and lay in the dark, the memory of that hazel gaze, so full of life and warmth, lingered stubbornly behind her eyelids. The days at Blackwood Manor fell into a pattern. By day, Elara was the quiet observer, fading into the background of walks, picnics, and parlor games. She listened to conversations, her mind a steel trap, filing away names, dates, and veiled references. She noted how Alistair always steered conversations towards military matters, his questions sharp and intelligent. He was a man gathering intelligence, there was no doubt. But for whom? And always, inevitably, Sebastian was there. He seemed to have appointed himself her unofficial protector. When she was overlooked during a conversation, he would draw her in with a quiet question. When she sat alone in the library, pretending to read a book of sermons, he would find her and engage her in a discussion about poetry or art, his insights revealing a deep and thoughtful mind beneath the easy charm. One afternoon, he found her studying a large map of Europe that hung in the library. "Planning a grand tour, Miss Vance?" he asked, a smile in his voice. She started, having been genuinely engrossed in tracing potential naval routes in the Channel. "Oh, no, my lord. I was just admiring the cartography." He came to stand beside her, his shoulder a respectful distance away. "It's an old one. The borders have shifted since this was drawn." He pointed to a region in the Balkans. "A messy business, politics and war. Do you miss it?" The question was out before she could stop it, a breach of her passive character. "The cavalry, I mean." Sebastian's smile became wistful. He leaned more heavily on his cane. "The camaraderie, the sense of purpose. Not the mud or the blood, certainly. But yes, a part of me will always miss it. It's a strange thing, to have your life's path altered so abruptly." There was a raw honesty in his voice that called to her own hidden self. She understood about secret lives and altered paths. "I am sorry," she said softly, and she meant it. He turned to look at her fully, his gaze searching her face. "You are different from the others here, Miss Vance. There's a stillness about you, a depth. It's refreshing." Her heart hammered against her ribs. This was dangerous. He was seeing too much. She had to retreat. "I fear you find quiet where there is only dullness, my lord," she said, dropping her gaze to the floor. "I doubt that very much," he murmured. The turning point came during a thunderous downpour that trapped the party indoors. Alistair, in a display of hostly generosity, suggested a tour of the estate's private archives, a collection of old family documents and maps. For Elara, it was the opportunity she had been waiting for. Access. The group meandered through the dusty, parchment-scented room. Elara lingered, her eyes scanning shelves and desks, and then she saw it. On Alistair's own writing desk, tucked under a blotter, was a sheet of paper filled with rows of seemingly random numbers. Her breath caught. It was a cipher grid. She was sure of it. Her mind, a well-oiled decryption engine, began whirring, trying to discern the pattern, the key. She was so absorbed she didn't notice the books piled on a high shelf next to the desk, nor the loose volume teetering on the edge. A sudden crack of thunder shook the manor. The vibration was slight, but it was enough. The heavy leather-bound book slipped from its perch, falling directly towards her head. She froze, her instincts as a spy warring with her cover as a clumsy miss. A strong arm shot out, wrapping around her waist and pulling her back against a solid, warm chest. The book crashed to the floor, missing her by inches, the sound echoing in the quiet room. "Good God!" Alistair's voice was sharp with alarm. "Are you all right, Miss Vance?" But it wasn't Alistair who held her. She looked up into the concerned, hazel eyes of Sebastian. His arm was still around her, firm and protective. The scent of sandalwood and fresh air filled her senses. I'm quite all right," she stammered, her composure truly shaken for the first time. "You could have been seriously hurt," Sebastian said, his voice low and intense. He didn't let go. His gaze held hers, and in that moment, the world, the mission, the cipher, the traitorous brother, narrowed to the feel of his arm around her and the frantic beating of her own heart. "Thank you, my lord," she whispered. "Sebastian," he corrected softly, his hand giving her waist a gentle, almost imperceptible squeeze before he finally, reluctantly, released her. As the party moved on, chattering about the near accident, Elara's eyes darted back to the desk. The paper with the numbers was gone. Alistair had slipped it into his coat pocket, his face a mask of calm. The moment of discovery was lost, but a new, more dangerous discovery had taken its place. She was falling for Lord Sebastian Finchley. That night, the storm raged on, mirroring the tempest within Elara. Huddled in her room, she wrote her report with a trembling hand. Confirmed sighting of a numerical cipher grid on Alistair's desk. Opportunity for transcription lost due to an incident. Subject A is vigilant and swiftly concealed the evidence. The method of transmission remains unknown. She put down her pen and pressed her cool hands to her flushed cheeks. She could still feel the imprint of Sebastian's arm. His protectiveness hadn't felt smothering or possessive. It had felt right. It was the same instinct that had him guiding her in croquet, including her in conversations, seeing the person behind the shy facade. He was everything Alistair was not. Where Alistair was cold calculation, Sebastian was warm empathy. Where Alistair collected information for his own gain, Sebastian shared stories to connect. The suspected traitor was a hollow man, while his brother was full of life and integrity. A treacherous thought whispered in her mind. What if I am wrong? What if Alistair is innocent? But the cipher grid was not a figment of her imagination. It was a code, and codes were her domain. She had to break it. She had to know the truth, not just for the War Office, but for Sebastian. The thought of him being destroyed by his brother's treachery was suddenly, unbearably painful. The next morning, a clear, bright day after the storm, Sebastian sought her out. He found her on a stone bench in the rose garden, the air heavy with the scent of damp earth and blooming flowers. I wanted to ensure you were fully recovered from your fright yesterday, he said, sitting beside her. Quite recovered, thank you, she said, offering him a small, genuine smile. The mask was becoming harder to wear around him. I am in your debt. Nonsense. He was quiet for a moment, watching a bee drone amongst the roses. My brother can be careless with his surroundings. That shelf has been unstable for weeks. I'd asked him to have it seen to. There was a faint edge to his voice, a rare glimpse of frustration with the impeccable Alistair. It was an accident, Elara said softly. Perhaps. He turned to her, his expression serious. Miss Vance, Elara, may I speak plainly? Her heart stuttered. Of course. I find myself drawn to you, in a way I have not experienced before. There is a light in you, a quiet intelligence, that I find utterly captivating. I know I am a damaged former soldier with little to offer but a title and a compromised estate, but my feelings are true. It was a declaration, a real, honest, and utterly terrifying declaration. The mission, her duty, her very identity, screamed at her to retreat, to feign confusion, to politely refuse. But looking into his earnest, hopeful face, Elara could not. The codebreaker, the spy, the phantom of the War Office, fell silent. The woman, Elara Vance, spoke. And I to you, Sebastian, she whispered. You have been nothing but kind and true. The joy that lit his face was like the sun breaking through the clouds. He took her hand, his grasp warm and firm, and raised it to his lips. The kiss he pressed to her knuckles was not a mere formality. It was a promise. And in that moment, Elara knew she was lost. She was in love with the brother of the man she was sworn to destroy. The following days were a bittersweet torture. Elara now operated in a world of stark contrasts. There were stolen moments with Sebastian in the sun-dappled gardens, conversations that stretched into the twilight, a growing understanding that felt more real than anything in her life ever had. And then there were the dark, secret hours spent in her room, piecing together the fragments of Alistair's treachery. Using the brief glimpse of the cipher grid, her mind had begun to unravel its pattern. It was a complex book cipher. The key was a specific text. She had to find which one. She spent hours in the Blackwood Library, cross-referencing the number patterns she remembered with every book on military strategy, history, and poetry she could find. Alistair was too clever to use something obvious. Her breakthrough came during another dinner party. Alistair, holding court, quoted a line from an obscure Roman poet, Lucan's Pharsalia, an epic about Caesar's civil war. It was a dark, cynical choice about the futility of honor in the face of ambition. A line about the conquering cause pleased the gods, but the conquered cause pleased Cato. It was the kind of sentiment that would appeal to a man betraying his country for ideology or personal gain. A spark connected in Elara's mind. Cato, the numbers. It was a long shot, but it was all she had. Later, under the guise of looking for a volume of Shakespeare, she located a copy of Pharsalia in the library. Her hands trembled as she pulled it from the shelf. She found a quiet corner, and using the line numbers and word positions from the fragmented grid she had memorized, she began to decode a message. The numbers slowly, painstakingly, resolved into words. Her blood ran cold. 4th, Proteus, Channel, Dawn, 23rd. It was a naval movement. The HMS Proteus, a destroyer, was scheduled for a patrol shift in the channel on the dawn of the 23rd. Information that was known only to the highest levels of the Admiralty. This was the proof. Irrefutable. She had done it. She had broken the code and uncovered the traitor. She should have felt triumphant. Instead, she felt a profound and crushing despair. She had to send the report to Thistlewood. The net would close. Alistair would be arrested, tried, and hanged for treason. And Sebastian, what would it do to Sebastian? His world, his family name would be shattered. The brother he clearly loved, despite their differences, was a monster. She had to make a choice, her country or her heart. That evening, she requested the use of the estate's telegraph office, citing a need to send a message to her ailing aunt. She drafted the encrypted message to Thistlewood, her hands steady despite the turmoil inside. She stated the evidence was conclusive. Lord Alistair Finchley was the traitor, using a cipher based on Lucan's Pharsalia. The arrest should be made at once. She handed the paper to the clerk, her fate sealed. As she walked back to the manor, the weight of her actions felt like a physical burden. She saw Sebastian waiting for her on the terrace, his figure silhouetted against the golden evening light. He smiled as she approached, and the love in his eyes was a knife in her soul. "Elara," he said, taking her hands, "I've been speaking with Alistair. There's something I must tell you." Before he could continue, the sound of hoofbeats and carriage wheels on gravel shattered the peace. 3 closed carriages, plain but official, came to a halt at the front door. Men in dark coats disembarked. Sir Malcolm Thistlewood led them, his face grim. The War Office had come for its traitor. Chaos erupted. Sebastian's grip on her hands tightened. "What is the meaning of this?" he demanded, stepping in front of Elara, a protective gesture that broke her heart anew. Thistlewood ignored him, his eyes finding Elara's for a brief, acknowledging moment before he addressed Alistair, who had emerged from the house, cool and composed. "Lord Alistair Finchley," Thistlewood's voice cut through the air. "By the power vested in me by the Crown, I am placing you under arrest for high treason and espionage against the British Empire." Gasps rippled through the guests who had gathered on the terrace. Alistair's mask of civility cracked. "This is an outrage. On what evidence?" "We have intercepted your communications," Thistlewood said coldly. "A cipher based on Lucan. The game is up, Finchley." Alistair's eyes, wide with shock and fury, darted around the group. They landed on Elara, who stood pale and silent behind Sebastian. He saw the lack of surprise in her gray eyes, the composed stillness that was so at odds with the shy miss she portrayed. "You," he breathed, his voice venomous. "It was you, the quiet little mouse. I should have known." Sebastian looked from his brother to Elara, confusion and dawning horror on his face. "Elara? What is he talking about?" It was Thistlewood who answered. "Miss Vance is one of our most brilliant codebreakers. She was sent here to uncover your brother's treason." The truth, laid bare, was more brutal than Elara could have imagined. The look on Sebastian's face, the betrayal, the shock, the utter devastation, would haunt her for the rest of her days. He dropped her hands as if they were made of fire. "A spy," he whispered, his voice raw. "All of it. It was a lie? A performance?" "Sebastian, no," she pleaded, her own composure finally shattering. "My mission was real, but my feelings for you, they were never part of the mission. They are the truest thing I have ever known." But it was too late. The trust was broken. As the officers led a cursing, struggling Alistair away, Sebastian turned his back on her. His shoulders slumped in defeat. He did not look at her again. Elara stood alone on the terrace, the victor who had lost everything. The code was broken, the traitor caught, but her heart lay in pieces at her feet. 1 month later, London. London had returned to its grey, indifferent self. Elara was back at her desk in the War Office, the Phantom once more. She had been commended by Thistlewood, promoted, given a raise. The victory felt ashen in her mouth. She had tried to write to Sebastian a dozen times. She had poured her heart out in letters, explaining her duty, her conflict, her genuine, unwavering love. She received no reply. The silence was its own answer. The world believed Lord Alistair Finchley had gone to the continent for his health. The truth of his arrest and subsequent execution was a state secret, buried in the darkest files of the War Office. The Finchley name was saved from public disgrace, but the private ruin was absolute. Life became a monochrome routine. Work, home, sleep, the vibrant colors of Blackwood Manor, the sound of Sebastian's laughter, the warmth of his hand. They were memories that tortured her in the quiet moments. Then, one rain-swept afternoon, as she was gathering her things to leave, a clerk informed her a gentleman was waiting for her in the foyer. Her heart, foolish and hopeful, leapt into her throat. She walked down the stairs, her pulse a frantic drumbeat, and there he was. Sebastian. He looked older, the lines around his eyes more deeply etched, the laughter in them replaced by a weary sorrow. He leaned on his cane, his gaze fixed on her as she descended. They stood in silence for a long moment, the sounds of Whitehall traffic a muted roar beyond the doors. "I read your letters," he said finally, his voice rough. "All of them." Elara could barely breathe. "And it took me a month," he said, "to reconcile the woman I fell in love with at Blackwood with the agent who destroyed my brother. I was angry, so very angry. The betrayal, it cut deeper than any wound I received on the battlefield." She nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "I know. I am so sorry, Sebastian. But," he continued, taking a limping step towards her, "in that month, I also had to reconcile the brother I thought I knew with the traitor who sold our countrymen to the enemy. I had to face the fact that my loyalty was to a ghost, to an ideal of a man who never existed. Alistair's choices were his own. His darkness was not my burden to carry, nor was it yours to uncover. He was close to her now, close enough for her to see the flecks of green in his hazel eyes. You were doing your duty," he said softly. "You were protecting this country, and in your own way you were protecting me from a far greater, more public ruin. You are the bravest person I have ever known, Elara Vance." A tear traced a path down her cheek. "The mission was my duty," she whispered, "but loving you was my choice." He reached out and gently took her hand, his touch as warm and sure as she remembered. "I cannot promise you an untroubled life. My name is shadowed. My leg is a constant reminder of a past I can never reclaim, and my heart is still mending. But it is yours. It has always been yours, if you will still have it." Elara looked at this good, honorable man who had every reason to hate her but had chosen, instead, to understand. He had broken the final, most impenetrable code, the code of her own guarded heart. She laced her fingers through his, the gesture feeling more like a homecoming than any she had ever known. "The mission is over, Sebastian," she said, her voice clear and strong, no longer a whisper. "But my love for you is not. It is the one code that was never meant to be broken." And there, in the stark foyer of the War Office, the shy, unassuming Miss and the protective, wounded lord found their happy beginning in the ashes of a shattered end. Their story was not one of simple codes and clear loyalties, but of the complex, messy, and ultimately redeeming cipher of the heart.